Daughter called me on a Tuesday in October, and I almost did not pick up. I was on the back porch of my house in Charlottesville, drinking the second cup of coffee I was not supposed to have, watching the Blue Ridge Mountains go grey in the early fog. Retired federal judge, 63 years old, bad knee, decent gun. That was my life. I had earned the quiet. The call was not from my daughter. It was from a number I did not recognize. Virginia area code, but not one I knew. I answered anyway. Some old instinct, 31 years on the bench, teaches you to pick up when something feels wrong. Is this Arthur Brennan? A woman's voice. Clinical. The kind of voice that has learned to deliver bad news without letting it land on her. It is, I said. Mr. Brennan, my name is Sandra Ortiz. I am the charge nurse at the ICU unit at UVA Medical Center. Your daughter Megan was brought in about 40 minutes ago following a serious automobile accident on Route 250. She is in critical condition. You should come as quickly as you can. I set down the coffee. I did not spill it. My hands were steady. They have always been steady. It is the only thing I was ever truly proud of, that steadiness. It has never once felt like a blessing. I drove to the hospital in 11 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I pulled out of the driveway, and again when I walked through the emergency entrance. 11 minutes to drive to the place where my daughter was fighting to stay alive. The ICU was on the 3rd floor. A different nurse met me at the elevator, a young woman with red hair and the particular expression I knew well from my years watching witnesses take the stand. The expression of someone who is about to say something true that they wish were not true. Megan had been struck by an oncoming vehicle that crossed the center line on Route 250 near Crozet. Head-on collision. She had been airlifted in. She had a fractured sternum, a collapsed lung, internal bleeding they had gotten under control, and a traumatic brain injury that they were monitoring carefully. She was sedated. She was stable, but stable in the way that means we are holding the line, and the line could move at any moment. I asked where her husband was. The nurse hesitated. In my experience, hesitation is a verdict. We've been trying to reach him, she said carefully. He is listed as her emergency contact. We've left 3 messages. His name was Colin Webb. 41 years old. My daughter had married him 4 years ago in a ceremony at a vineyard outside Staunton. I had paid for that wedding. I had walked Megan down that aisle myself. I had shaken Colin's hand at the altar and looked him in the eye and believed what I saw there. I am a man who spent 3 decades reading people for a living. I was wrong about Colin Webb. I tried his number. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. His voice, smooth and unhurried, asking me to leave a message. I did not leave a message. I sat down in the chair next to Megan's bed. The machines were breathing for her in a rhythm that had nothing to do with sleep. She had a bandage across her forehead and a brace around her neck, and she looked smaller than she had any right to look. She is my only child. Her mother died when Megan was 9. It has been the 2 of us ever since, and I have never once thought of that as a hardship. It was just the shape of our lives. I took her hand. I did not say anything. I have never been a man who talks to people who cannot hear me. I just held on. At some point, a doctor came in and explained the situation again in more technical terms. I listened. I asked the right questions. I thanked him. He left. At some point after that, Colin arrived. He did not rush in. That was the first thing I noticed. He walked in. His coat was on, and it was a nice coat, charcoal wool, the kind of coat you put on before you go somewhere, not the kind you grab off a hook on your way out the door in a panic. His hair was combed. He smelled faintly of something that was not cologne, something sweeter, the kind of scent that clings to restaurant booths and other people's houses. Arthur. He said my name like a greeting at a dinner party. I came as fast as I could. I was in a meeting. I didn't have my phone on me. He had been in a meeting at 6:45 in the evening. On a Tuesday. Sit down, Colin, I said. He sat in the chair on the other side of the bed. He looked at Megan for a moment, a careful, measured look, and then he looked away. He pulled out his phone. I need to call my office, he said. Let them know what is happening. Your office, I repeated. I have a deal closing this week. There are people depending on me. I looked at my daughter's hand in mine, and I thought about 31 years of listening to people explain why they had done the things they had done. The excuses always had the same texture. They were always technically plausible. They were always missing something essential. "Make your call," I said. He stepped out into the hallway. He was gone for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the door. When he came back, he sat down, scrolled through something on his phone, and then said, "The doctors say she's stable." "That's good. That's really good." I did not respond. I stayed at the hospital until 2 in the morning. Colin left at 9:30. He said he needed to be home, that he had an early call the next day, that there was nothing more he could do by sitting there, that Megan would want him rested so he could take care of things. He kissed her on the forehead before he left. It was a perfect kiss, positioned exactly right, tender exactly enough. The kind of kiss a person performs rather than gives. I watched him walk out the door. Then I sat in that chair and I thought about the coat and the hair and the scent and the 22 minutes. And I thought about my daughter, who had called me 3 weeks ago and said, in a voice that was trying to sound casual and failing, that she and Colin had been arguing about money, that he had been withdrawing cash in amounts she did not understand, that when she asked him about it, he told her she was being paranoid and then did not speak to her for 3 days. I had told her to come stay with me for a weekend, and she had said she would, and she never did. I drove home at 2 in the morning. I sat at my kitchen table. I did not sleep. By 5 in the morning, I had made 2 phone calls. The first was to a man named Roy Stokes. Roy had been an investigator with the Virginia State Police for 24 years before he retired. He had testified in my courtroom more times than either of us could count. I trusted his work because I had watched him do it. "Roy," I said when he picked up, "I need you to find out everything about a man named Colin Webb. I need to know where he was this evening before he came to the hospital, and I need to know who he was with, and I need to know why my daughter was asking me about unexplained cash withdrawals 3 weeks ago." Roy did not ask many questions. That is another thing I respected about him. The second call was to my former clerk, a young woman named Patricia. I stopped myself. I have learned not to put certain names on paper. I will just say this. She was a second-year associate at a firm in Richmond that handled asset protection cases, and she owed me nothing but had always acted as though she owed me everything, which is the best kind of person to know in a situation like this. "I may need you to look at some joint financial documents," I said. "I will call you back." Then I drove back to the hospital and sat with my daughter. Roy called me back at noon. He did not waste words. Colin Webb had not been in the meeting on Tuesday evening. He had been at a condominium on the west side of Charlottesville, in a building I knew because I had signed an eviction order involving a tenant there about 6 years ago. The condo was not his. It was rented in the name of a woman named Diane Fogarty, 34 years old, who worked in commercial real estate lending. Colin's firm did business with her company. He had been there for nearly 3 hours. He had been there the previous Tuesday as well. And the Tuesday before that, Roy had also pulled Colin's banking activity through channels I preferred not to examine too closely. In the past 14 months, Colin had withdrawn $62,000 in cash from a personal account Megan did not know existed. He had opened the account 11 months ago, 2 months after their joint account at First Community Bank had reached a balance that apparently he considered sufficient to notice. 11 months ago. I thought about the insurance policy. Megan and Colin had taken out life insurance policies when they got married. Standard, I had thought, reasonable. $1 million each, naming each other as beneficiaries. That was what Megan had told me. I called Roy back. "Find out if Colin has made any changes to Megan's life insurance policy in the past year," I said. Roy called back in 40 minutes. The policy had been amended 8 months ago. The payout had been increased from $1 million to $2.5 million. A rider had been added covering accidental death. If Megan died as a result of an accident, Colin would receive $5 million. Megan had not mentioned any of this to me. I drove to the hospital. Megan was still sedated. She was still stable. The doctor told me the brain imaging looked more encouraging than expected. She would likely begin reducing the sedation in 24 to 48 hours. I sat with her for 2 hours. Then I went to find Colin. He was in the family waiting area down the hall, sitting in a chair by the window, with his phone in his hand and a cardboard cup of coffee on the table beside him. He looked up when he saw me. He arranged his face into something appropriate. "Any update?" he asked. "She is improving," I said. "Sit with me for a moment." I sat down across from him. I leaned forward with my elbows on my knees, the way I used to sit during closing arguments when a lawyer was making a point I wanted to hear clearly. "How long have you known Diane Fogarty?" I asked. His face did not move immediately. There was a delay, less than a second, but I've been watching people's faces for a very long time. "I don't know that name," he said. "You were at her condominium for 3 hours yesterday evening," I said. "You were there last Tuesday, and the Tuesday before. Roy Stokes has photographs." He set his phone face down on the table. He looked at the window. "This is not the time," he said. "It is the only time," I said. "Megan is in a bed 40 feet from here, with machines breathing for her, and I'm looking at a man who increased her accidental death insurance payout to $5 million 8 months ago and has been pulling $62,000 in cash out of a secret account for over a year." Now his face changed. The arrangement broke apart. Underneath it was something that was not grief, and not guilt, and not love. It was calculation. I know what calculation looks like on a human face. I have seen it 10,000 times. "I want you to listen carefully," I said. My voice had the register I used for sentencing, not loud. Never loud, just final. "My daughter is alive. Whatever you were hoping for, it has not happened, and it is not going to happen. What is going to happen is this. You are going to tell me the truth about the money, the insurance, and the woman in that condominium, or I am going to make a phone call to the Albemarle County Commonwealth's attorney, who I have known personally for 18 years, and another call to the Virginia Department of Insurance Fraud Division, and a third call to the journalist at the Daily Progress who has been wanting to write a feature about financial crime in Charlottesville real estate for the past 2 years. Colin looked at me. "You can't prove anything," he said. "I don't need to prove anything today," I said. "I just need to make the calls, and once I make them, your name is in circulation. In this city, in this business, that is sufficient." He picked up his coffee. He drank from it. He was trying to look like a man who was thinking, but he was actually just buying seconds. "The money was for the condo," he said. "I was paying rent for her. It was separate from Megan. I kept it separate because I did not want to hurt her." "The insurance," I said. "That was financial planning. Our advisor recommended we increase coverage." "Which advisor?" Silence. "The accidental death rider," I said. "Whose idea was that?" He did not answer. I stood up. "I am going to make those calls now," I said. "Wait." His voice had a different quality now. Lower, stripped of the dinner party ease. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something," I said. "My daughter is going to recover. When she recovers, she is going to have the best divorce attorney in the Commonwealth of Virginia sitting across the table from you. She is going to walk away with the house in Crozet, her investment accounts, and half of your business interest in the Staunton development, which I know about because I read documents the way most people read menus. In exchange for that, I will give you 72 hours to get your name off the insurance policy amendment and restore the original terms before I involve the insurance fraud division. After 72 hours, that offer is gone and everything I have goes to the DA's office." He stared at me. "You were a federal judge," he said. "You can't do this." "I am a retired federal judge," I said. "I can do almost anything." I left him sitting there. I went back to Megan's room. I sat down beside her. The machines kept their rhythm. That evening, Roy called again. There was something else. The accident on Route 250 had been investigated by the Virginia State Police. The initial report listed the cause as driver error on the part of the other vehicle. A pickup truck registered to a man named Dale Hutchins, who had been charged with reckless driving. Dale Hutchins was 26 years old, had 2 prior traffic violations, and had been driving with a blood alcohol content of 0.11 at the time of the collision. Drunk driver. Terrible accident. The end. Except Roy had a contact in the VSP's accident reconstruction unit, and his contact had mentioned, informally over coffee, that something had felt slightly off about the Hutchins vehicle's trajectory. The angle of impact was consistent with a vehicle that had accelerated into the center lane rather than drifted, and Dale Hutchins, when interviewed, had been insistent, even through the alcohol and the shock, that he had not crossed the line voluntarily, that something had happened to his steering, that it had gone loose, his steering. I thought about $62,000 in cash. I thought about a man with a background in commercial real estate who knew contractors and subcontractors and people who worked on things, who knew people who could be paid in cash to do things that looked like accidents. I called Roy back. "I need you to find out if Dale Hutchins has any connection to Colin Webb," I said. "Business, social, financial, anything. Arthur." Roy said slowly. He never called me Arthur. He always called me Judge, even in retirement. The fact that he called me Arthur told me he had already been thinking the same thing. "I know," I said. "Give me until morning," he said. I did not sleep. I sat in Megan's room, and I held her hand, and I listened to the machines, and I thought about the 9-year-old girl who had stood at her mother's funeral in a blue dress that was slightly too big because I had guessed at the size, and how she had not cried until we got home, and how she had cried then for a very long time, and how I had sat on the edge of her bed and not said a word because there was nothing to say, and how that was the moment I understood that my only job for the rest of my life was to make sure she got through it. Whatever it was, Roy called at 6:40 in the morning. Dale Hutchins had worked from 2019 to 2021 for a property maintenance company called Blue Ridge Site Services. Blue Ridge Site Services had a contract with Webb Commercial Properties, Colin's firm, for maintenance and inspection services at 3 of their managed properties. The contract had been terminated in 2021. In September of this year, 6 weeks ago, Dale Hutchins had received a wire transfer of $8,000 from an LLC registered in Delaware. The LLC was called Farwell Holdings. Farwell Holdings had been incorporated 14 months ago, shortly after Colin Webb opened his separate personal account. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I called the Commonwealth's attorney, not as a threat this time, for real. His name was Patrick Duvain. He had clerked for me during my second year on the bench. He picked up on the second ring. "Arthur," he said, "what's going on?" "Patrick," I said, "I need you to listen to everything I am about to tell you, and I need you to tell me whether what I have is sufficient to open a criminal investigation. Do not give me the answer you think I want. Give me the answer the evidence supports." He listened for 34 minutes. I went through all of it. Roy's findings, the insurance amendment, the LLC, the wire transfer, the VSP reconstruction anomaly. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. "The wire transfer alone is not sufficient," he said, "but combined with the insurance amendment, the financial pattern, and the reconstruction question, it is enough for me to authorize a formal inquiry. I will call VSP this morning and have them take a second look at the Hutchins vehicle. If there was tampering, we will find it." "Thank you," I said. "Arthur," he said, "are you all right?" "No," I said, "but that is not relevant right now." I hung up. That afternoon, the doctors began reducing Megan's sedation. It took about 18 hours. She came back slowly, the way a tide comes in, not all at once, but steadily and without stopping. The first thing she said when she was fully awake and they had confirmed she was oriented and coherent was my name. Not Colin's. Mine. Dad. Her voice was rough from the tube they had removed. She looked at me with eyes that were still slightly unfocused and said, "What happened to my car?" I laughed. I actually laughed. It was the most undignified thing I had done in years, and I did not care at all. "We will deal with the car later," I said. She looked around the room. "Where's Colin?" I took her hand. I looked at her face, which was my face, which had always been my face since she was born, and I told her something that I had practiced saying without flinching. "He is not here," I said. "There are some things I need to tell you when you are ready to hear them." She looked at me for a long moment. "How bad?" she asked. That was my daughter. She has always been direct. She got it honestly. "Significant," I said. She closed her eyes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, tell me." I told her everything. Not quickly, not softened, and not all at once. I told her what Roy had found. I told her about the insurance. I told her about Diane Fogarty. I told her about the wire transfer and Dale Hutchins and the VSP inquiry. I told her what I had said to Colin in the waiting room and what he had said back. She did not cry during any of it. She listened the way I had trained her to listen, with her eyes steady and her hands still. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I knew about the woman," she said finally. "I didn't have proof, but I knew." "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at the ceiling. "Because I was ashamed," she said, "and because I thought I was wrong. I kept thinking maybe I was just paranoid." She paused. "He was very good at making me feel paranoid." I did not say anything. I knew what that was. I had seen it in courtrooms, the slow erasure of another person's confidence in their own perception. It is one of the oldest forms of cruelty and one of the hardest to prosecute. "You were not paranoid," I said. "No," she said. "I was not." She looked at me. "What happens now?" she said. "Now you heal," I said. "And when you are strong enough, we deal with everything else, but not before. Dad." She tightened her fingers around mine. "The accident. Do you think he—" "I think the investigation will tell us what happened," I said. "I think Patrick Duvain is very good at his job, and I think you are alive, which is the only thing that matters to me at this moment." She was quiet again. "I want a lawyer," she said. "I already have one in mind," I said. Over the following weeks, the picture came together the way cases always do, not in a single dramatic revelation, but in the accumulation of small facts that eventually become impossible to arrange into any shape other than the true one. The VSP accident reconstruction team examined Dale Hutchins' pickup truck. They found evidence of interference with the power steering module, a targeted modification to the electronic steering assist system that could be triggered remotely under specific speed and road conditions. It was not the kind of thing you found by accident. It was the kind of thing you found when you were looking for it. Dale Hutchins, when confronted with this finding and with documentation of the wire transfer from Farwell Holdings, took 11 hours to decide whether to cooperate. Then he cooperated fully. He had met Colin Webb at a bar in Waynesboro 14 months ago, introduced through a mutual acquaintance from the old Blue Ridge Site Services days. Colin had been friendly. They had talked about money and opportunity. He had not understood exactly what he was agreeing to do until the day he was asked to do it. By then, he told the investigators, he had already spent 4,000 of the 8. Colin was arrested on a Thursday morning. His attorney made a statement outside the courthouse in Charlottesville. The statement used phrases like deeply disturbing allegations and full confidence in the justice system. Colin himself did not speak. I watched the news coverage from Megan's living room in Crozet. She had been discharged 3 weeks earlier, and I had been staying with her while she recovered. She was moving through her house in stages, slowly, carefully, the way you move through a place when you are figuring out what of it belongs to you and what needs to go. She came and stood in the doorway when the coverage came on. We watched in silence. When it was over, she turned off the television. "I want to redecorate this living room," she said. I looked at her. "When I'm better," she said. "I want everything different, new paint, new furniture. I want it to not look like anything it looked like before." "That seems reasonable," I said. She went back to the kitchen, and I heard the kettle go on, and the sound of cabinets opening and closing, the ordinary sounds of a person who is alive and making tea in her own kitchen on a Thursday afternoon. That for a while. Colin Webb was indicted on charges of criminal conspiracy, solicitation to commit malicious wounding, and insurance fraud. His attorney filed motions. There will be a trial. These things take time, and I know that better than most. Diane Fogarty was not charged with any crime. She had not known what Colin was capable of, or so the investigation concluded. She cooperated with the prosecution and moved to Richmond shortly after. The divorce proceedings are handled by the best family law attorney in Charlottesville, a woman who was recommended to me by a colleague and who had, within 3 weeks of being retained, identified and filed claims against 2 additional accounts. Colin had failed to disclose. Megan will walk away with the house, her retirement accounts, and a settlement that reflects 14 months of systematic financial deception. Farwell Holdings was dissolved by court order in November. Last month, Megan drove herself to the grocery store for the first time since the accident. She called me from the parking lot. I did it, she said. I know, I said. I was scared, she said. I was scared, she answered. I know that too, I said. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, Dad, can I ask you something? Always, I said. When you were sitting with me in the hospital, all those nights, what were you thinking about? I thought about the chair next to her bed, about the machines, about the blue dress that was too big, and the long cry that came after, and the edge of her bed, and the silence that was the only right response to certain kinds of grief. I was thinking about the first time you ever beat me at chess, I said. You were 12. You did it in 19 moves, and then you tried to pretend you had not done it on purpose. She laughed. It was the best sound I had heard in 4 months. I had absolutely done it on purpose, she said. I know, I said. I have always known. She laughed again, and then she said she had to go inside before the ice cream melted, and she hung up. I set the phone down on the kitchen table. Outside the window, the mountains were going grey in the afternoon light, the way they do in November. That slow, patient grey that is not sad. Exactly, just honest, the way things look when they are not pretending to be anything other than what they are. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Just the one. I sat there and I thought about something I learned in 31 years of watching people account for their choices in rooms with no exits. I thought about the thing that separates the people who survive their worst moments from the ones who do not. It is not money. It is not power. It is not knowing the right people or having the right resources, though those things matter more than we like to admit. It is the willingness to look at what is in front of you without flinching and then decide what you are going to do about it. Megan is doing that every day. I watch her do it. I am very proud of her. If you are watching this and you have ever felt that pull toward doubt, that voice that tells you your instincts are wrong, that you are imagining things, that the person who benefits most from your confusion could not possibly be the source of it, listen to me. You are not imagining it. Your instincts are not broken. The people who tell you that you are paranoid are sometimes simply afraid of what you would do if you trusted yourself. Trust yourself. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. Do not wait until you have proof. Start looking for it now, and if someone tries to take what is yours, remember that the law is slow, but it is thorough, and it has a very long memory, longer than you would think, longer than they are counting on. My name is Arthur Brennan. I am a retired federal judge from Charlottesville, Virginia. I spent 31 years making sure that the right things were put on the record. This is on the record now. If this story reached you and it meant something, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I want to know how far a father's account of the truth can travel. Like this video, subscribe to Raven Vengeance, and keep your eyes open. I have been asked more than once since all of this came to light whether I feel satisfied, whether justice being served feels the way people imagine it does. The honest answer is that it does not feel the way movies suggest. There is no moment of triumph. There is no clean finish line. What there is, mostly, is exhaustion, and underneath the exhaustion, something quieter. Something that feels less like victory and more like the ground coming back under your feet after a long time of standing on something that was always going to give way. Colin Webb made choices. He made them one at a time, over months, and each one made the next one easier to make. That is how it works. It is never one large decision to become the kind of person who would do what he did. It is a series of small ones. The first lie, the first hidden account, the first moment he looked at my daughter and saw a policy number instead of a person. Each step required him to become slightly less than he had been before, and he took every step willingly because he believed the math worked in his favor. The math never works in their favor. It only appears to, for a while. What undid him was not my resources or my connections, though those mattered. What undid him was the same thing that undoes everyone who builds their plans on the assumption that the people around them are not paying attention. He assumed my daughter was too trusting to notice. He assumed I was too old to act. He assumed that the distance between what he intended and what could be proven was wide enough to protect him. He measured everything in terms of what he could get away with, and that is a kind of blindness. It narrows your world down to tactics and timing, and it makes you forget that the people you are underestimating have a different kind of intelligence. The kind that is not about cleverness. The kind that comes from actually caring about something other than yourself. Megan noticed. She noticed months before the accident. She did not trust what she noticed, because he had spent 2 years teaching her not to trust her own perception. That is a particular kind of harm, and it takes longer to heal from than broken bones. She is working on it. I watch her do it every day, and it is harder than anything I have ever done, and it is not my work to do. It is hers. She is doing it anyway. What I want to say to anyone watching this who has ever sat in that particular silence, the silence of knowing something is wrong and being afraid to say it out loud because saying it out loud makes it real. Is this? It was already real. Your silence did not protect you from it. It only gave it more time in the dark. Intelligence is not about having the right answers. It is about being willing to look at what is actually in front of you. Integrity is not about being perfect. It is about what you do when you finally see it clearly. And resilience is not about not being hurt. It is about deciding, even after you have been hurt in ways you did not know were possible, that the rest of your life still belongs to you. Megan called me last week. She had repainted the living room. Soft grey, she said, like the mountains in the morning. I told her it sounded exactly right. It does.